Hi, everybody. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, Texas on Tuesday, July the 29th. And welcome to our commentary. Well, before I get into the topics, I just want to express my condolences to the victims in New York City of this horrible shooting. I think there's a couple of women who were killed. There's a police officer who was killed, maybe another person as well. Just an absolutely horrible situation. And then, of course, as soon as this happens, the Democrats go into the gun control talk. Well, if we only had more gun control, if we could only do away with assault weapons. Well, the problem is that they already have gun control in New York City. They already have a ban on these weapons, but yet people get them. And people get them because that's the way it is. The people who respect the guns, the people who don't bring a gun to that building to work, are the people who are dead right now. But this guy could care less about gun laws, and that's what happened. So, um, not a good time to politicize things, but at the same time, it does make me angry. Every time that something like this happens in a Democrat city, instead of looking at the situation in the city and the lawlessness that unfortunately exists in many of these Democrat cities like New York City, instead of looking at that and trying to deal with that and supporting the police more, what do? They get off on gun control and gun control as if somehow that's going to fix the problem. It's not. It's not. So, what a mess. But again, our sympathies and condolences to the families of all involved in that terrible situation. Well, President Trump is flying back to the United States today from that tremendous trade deal that he made with the European Union. Tremendous deal. I think he was also in the UK and Scotland playing golf or something at one of his courses out there. Pretty beautiful scenery from what I could tell on the video. And of course, this is coming a few days after the Japan deal that was made. So here you have, very quickly, in less than a week, President Trump has done Japan and the European Union. That's a pretty good record. I mean, that's a pretty good record. And, if you talk to the exporters, they're all pretty happy with it. They all think this is going to be good for them, people who export, as well as American consumers. And I would think the Europeans should be happy with it because they'll continue to have access to the markets in the United States. So I think, this is a good deal by President Trump. And that kind of takes me to a point that I want to make today. And that is that what you're seeing right now is President Trump, advancing in the right direction, and the Democrats really stuck in this "we hate Trump" corner, and they're just stuck there. They're not going anywhere. And the evidence, of course, is this Wall Street Journal poll that came out that says the Democrats are down to their worst ratings in 35 years. I was trying to calculate that. I guess that takes you back to 1990. That would have been that would have been President Bush. And back then, of course, you also had, what was it in 1990? Oh, okay, the Kuwait War, the Gulf War that was about to happen. So, the Democrat Party is sort of, as they say, lost in the wilderness. They don't know how to come back. And they just keep going further, deeper and deeper into the wilderness. And on the other hand, you have President Trump scoring success and with a strong foreign policy and looking like a leader when he goes to visit with these other people. Look at the body language when you see President Trump with these other leaders. Who's in charge? Who's the top dog, as they say? Who's the top wolf? President Trump. So, I mean, look, I think Americans see that. Americans look at that and they go, this guy is on top of the job. He may not be perfect. He may not be, perfect in every shape and, in everything he says and so on and so on. But I think they like the direction and they like the fact that he's scoring success. It's the old, I think it was Osama bin Laden who said this. I think I may be wrong, but I recall that he said something like this, but maybe other people have said something similar. And Osama bin Laden said something that people like to follow a strong horse, and that, the strong horse gets other people to follow, or other horses, I guess, to follow. And that's kind of what we're seeing here. President Trump is gaining as a leader. I think you'll see pretty good improvement in his polling data, which is not as bad as they make it out to be. Okay, that's another thing. His polling ratings right now, if you look at, excuse me for a second, if you look at the average of polls, he's at 46%. Okay, that's not a terrible place to be after you've had 6 months of being very much a doer. You know, when you do things, you're going to obviously create some enemies and you're going to create some controversy. And he's been out there doing a lot of things, you know, the bill that he just signed, you know, the confrontation with Ukraine, all kinds of things. He's been a very visible man. He hasn't been sitting around doing nothing. So that's going to create some controversy. But when you're at 46% and then you combine with that, frankly, I don't think the media coverage has been very fair. I wasn't expecting it to be, but I don't think it has been. So anyway, I think 46% is not a bad average of all of the approval polls. And of course, all of this is, you know, what I'm sure President Trump and the GOP is looking forward to is what's going to happen in the next election, which is still a year and, my goodness, a year and what, 15 months away, or a year and 3 months, or 15 months away. I mean, that's still a very long time. But I've got to believe if you're President Trump and you're setting up these trade deals that should be welcomed by the American people, and you're setting up some things, putting some things in place that hopefully by the fall, by Labor Day 2026, by the fall, when people get into the campaign, that they will keep a Republican House. A Republican House is essential to the last 2 years of President Trump. I mean, you have to have a Republican House. If the Democrats were to take over the House, it'd be chaos, complete chaos in the House. And you don't want to be doing that. So I'm sure the White House is focusing on November 2026. But again, I like what's happening in the country politically. President Trump is moving in the right direction, and a strong direction. And you have a Democrat Party that is completely lost, doesn't have a message. Their entire message is Trump is a dictator, or Trump is Hitler, or Trump is bad, or whatever. Well, again, that's not going to make it. That's not going to make it because that's not addressing any of the country's issues. On immigration, for example, they're completely lost on immigration. The country wants to fix the immigration problem, and Trump is doing that. And what are the Democrats offering? Well, they're nitpicking as to whether ICE is picking up grandmothers. ICE is not picking up grandmothers. That's not what they're doing. They're not picking up the young woman who's cleaning your house. That's not what they're doing. Now, if the young woman who's cleaning your house or your grandmother has a letter from a judge that says, "Dear grandmother, you have to leave the country because you don't qualify for political asylum. You know, you had a trial and you don't qualify for political asylum." Yeah, maybe that particular grandmother is going to have to leave the country. But overall, they're focusing on criminals. And every time you see these reports of ICE going into these cities, they come out with a bunch of criminals. They really do. Or the situation in California where they went into a farm, and not only they found out that there were lots of illegals working in that farm, but that you had minor children there. And some of the minor children were not, were apparently part of that group that had was lost or whatever. So, I mean, look, I think most Americans look at that and they say, good job, ICE, for doing the work that you're doing. So the Democrats are against all of this. And, I don't think that's playing well with the overwhelming majority of people. That Wall Street Journal poll that I quoted has a bunch of issues. And in all the major issues, whether it's the economy, foreign policy, inflation, immigration, on all those issues, the public is trusting the Republicans more than the Democrats. Now, I think in one issue, healthcare, the Democrats come out better. But overall, the Republicans come out better. And that's because President Trump is fixing problems. He's doing things. And the Democrats are just screaming and calling people names and engaging honestly in antics that are not going to play well in the country, to say the least. Just some quick things here as we wrap up. The Senate has to move ahead and approve President Trump's nominees. There are some nominees that are still lingering out there. They got to get that done. They have got to get that done. If it means they got to stay in town, well, that's the way it is. But they got to get it. They got to get it done because they have to. They have to get it done. The president has to have his team in place. And I don't know why some of these nominations have taken this long, but they shouldn't. I don't care who the president is. They should nominate and put his team together out there as soon as possible. And of course, here in Texas, we're going to be going through a lot of redistricting talk over the next few weeks. And, the Democrats are doing their usual, we're going to leave town and that kind of thing. And, the last time they did it, they left town. So I'm assuming they're going to leave town at some point. But eventually, of course, they'll come back like they always do. Eventually, they'll take the vote, and eventually the districts will be redrawn. And how that stacks up, I don't know. But I think, yes, there could be some Republican advantages. So I believe as many as 3 or 4 seats could be added to the Republican column. Again, that's what parties do when they're in power. The Democrats do it in Illinois. They do it in Maryland. They do it in California. So I don't want to hear any complaining, because that's what they do when they have majorities. And we're just going to do the same thing here in Texas. And I think they just finished it in Florida. So we'll see. We'll see how all of that shakes out. I got to say a quick thing here before we go. You may have heard that Ryan Sandberg passed away. If you're a baseball fan and you grew up in the 1980s, or you used to watch baseball in the 1980s into the early 90s, Ryan Sandberg was the second baseman for the Cubs, Chicago Cubs, one of the most popular players ever to wear the Cubs uniform. And I think overall, one of the most popular players in Major League Baseball history. He was a great second baseman, a great hitter, just a great credit to the game of baseball, just a perfect role model for the game of baseball, just a great guy. He passed away the last couple of days. He, I think, developed cancer over the last year and a half. I was familiar with that because I had heard the story that he was being treated for cancer over the last year, but I guess he just couldn't overcome it and he passed away. Great player. And I'm pretty sure that the Cubs in Chicago will do something very nice to remember Ryan Sandberg. I mean, just a great, absolutely great player. Thank you for listening. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye, everybody.